It's been 40 years since Washington switched diplomatic recognition from Taipei to Beijing. That was back in December of 1978. 4 months after that, the United States passed a law called the Taiwan Relations Act, which went into effect on April 10th, 1979, and it's been the cornerstone for Taiwan-U.S. ties ever since. Now, with us here in the studio now to talk a little bit more about this is the American Institute in Taiwan's spokesperson, Amanda Mansour. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here.
It's great to have you here. I know it's a very busy time for you.
It is a very busy time. As you mentioned, we're coming up on the 40th anniversary of the Taiwan Relations Act, which also happens to be AIT's birthday. The American Institute in Taiwan was created by the passage of the Taiwan Relations Act. So we have a whole slate of activities planned for all of 2019, but specifically they sort of culminate right now in April.
And so what kinds of things are going to be happening this month?
So, as I mentioned, this month is the actual anniversary of the passing of the legislation, the Taiwan Relations Act. So, actually, next week, on Monday, April 15th, we will be hosting a big celebration, a reception, and a ceremony in which members of Congress, and as we recently announced, former Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, will be leading a large delegation of both current and former U.S. government officials, as well as some members of the U.S. Congress, who are here to mark this really auspicious and exciting occasion, to think about how far we've come and to look at the future and the different ways we can kind of expand our cooperation. So we've got that event coming up next week.
Okay, and you have also a series of talks that are scheduled and other events as well?
Yeah, so next week we are also hosting the Women's Economic Empowerment Summit, which is actually a large, open to the public event in which we are looking at all the ways that women are sort of critical to sustainable, inclusive economic growth. We'll be hosting corporate leaders from a lot of really well-known companies. President Tsai will actually be speaking at that event and bringing together participants from, I think, over 15 countries to come and talk about ways in which women can continue to enhance economies. And then there are also a series of conferences that sort of examine the effects that the Taiwan relationship, US-Taiwan relationship has had on both the US and Taiwan and on the world more generally.
Wow, so you have your hands full then.
Yes,
and
that's right.
And this is all coming also while you're moving house.
Oh my goodness. We didn't actually know it was going to be like that. We've been trying to move for a pretty long time. I think for the longest time, my least favorite question was, when are you moving? Because I didn't know the answer and I didn't want to commit to an answer. And we've delayed and delayed, but we're really thrilled that we finally have a hard date. Mm-hmm. We will close the gates on our current facility on May 1st.
Okay, and this is the American Institute in Taiwan that is closing its doors, and a brand new compound is opening on May 6th.
That's right, on May 6th. So our current compound on Xinyi Road, where people have been coming for a long, long time to get visas and passports and to meet with people like me, that office compound will be closing on May 1st, and as of May 6th, we'll be welcoming people to our new compound in Nehu.
Okay.
It's really large, it's really beautiful and modern. People may know that we actually have office buildings all over the city, and they'll actually be all consolidated into this one new modern facility.
Wow, and it's a huge facility. It's $255 million investment.
That's right.
And I've seen pictures of it. It looks really cool. Is there anything inside that we can look forward to? Any exciting surprises?
Surprises, I'm not sure. There's a lot of really beautiful art from different Taiwan local artists that we'll be highlighting. The building itself, as you mentioned, is really large, really modern. We think it will just be a much more convenient experience for people who have to come and see it. But more importantly, this to us isn't just a brick and mortar building. It is that, of course, but it's also a symbol of our commitment to the US-Taiwan relationship. I mean, this is us telling Taiwan and people here, we're here to stay, we're not going anywhere, we just made this enormous investment. And as people may not know, this is actually the only purpose-built facility for any US mission. This is the only purpose-built facility for any foreign mission in Taiwan.
Okay, what does that mean?
It means that the Japanese representatives or the French or the Italians, they use buildings that were built for other purposes.
I see, okay.
So they use office space that might be in a skyscraper that hosts other things. This is the other building that was constructed and designed explicitly to host a foreign mission to Taiwan.
So it's a big deal. And that also means that there are elements within the design that are connected to both the United States and Taiwan because it was very thoughtfully built as well.
That's right. So, for example, we worked really hard to make sure that this building meets both the U.S. and Taiwan's very high environmental standards. The entranceway to the consular part of the building, so the place where people would go to apply for a visa or a passport, is called the Butterfly Pavilion, and it actually features images of indigenous butterflies to Taiwan and the United States. It's really beautiful and interesting. Yeah, we really hope people have opportunities to come by and see us.
So now you said that the old one closes on May 1st, the new one opens on May 6th. I'm imagining a lot of work is going into preparing this big move.
Yes.
What does it take to move the AIT?
I mean, the short answer is months and months of planning. So I don't envy my colleagues who have been making spreadsheets and charts and working with different contractors and companies who are expert in moving IT equipment and boxes and furniture and all these things. We have a very large staff. We have some staff who's been in their offices for 20, 30, 40 years. So people have a lot of personal items they need to pack up. It's a really big process. I think it's an emotional process for a lot of people, but I think people are also really looking forward to kind of greeting the future in this big new beautiful building where we'll get more sunlight and yeah, I don't know if you've been to the old building.
Yes.
It's pretty dingy.
Yeah, I don't want to say it's on its last legs, but literally it is on its last legs.
It is on its last legs, and it doesn't, I don't think it really projects the image that we want to be projecting about the work that we're doing, which I think in a lot of ways is really cutting edge and in a lot of ways is really future facing. Yeah.
Now, one of the things we want to talk to you about today is the Taiwan Relations Act. Of course, not only is AIT celebrating 40 years, the Taiwan Relations Act, there are commemorative events to mark the fact that this act was passed by Congress and has been in place for 40 years.
Right.
Essentially, it's the cornerstone of ties between Taiwan and the United States. Can you maybe give us an idea of what exactly the act does, and how can the average person in Taipei feel that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So after the U.S. formally derecognized China, there was a really strong...
The Republic of China.
Yes, sorry, the Republic of China. After the U.S. changed recognition from Republic of China to the People's Republic of China in 1979, there was a very strong feeling in the U.S., specifically in the U.S. Congress, that we wanted to continue to maintain some sort of ties, even if unofficial, with the people of Taiwan, with Taiwan's economy, and so on. And so, what we sometimes say is that the TRA, the Taiwan Relations Act, ensured that while the ties were unofficial, they were not unimportant.
Okay.
So the Taiwan Relations Act establishes a mechanism by which the United States and Taiwan can continue to have an economic relationship, can continue to have a cultural exchange relationship, and can also continue to have security cooperation that we feel is in all of our best interests, serves regional interests, and also serves a lot of our deeply held values. So while the American Institute in Taiwan is not formally an embassy or a consulate, we still do things like issue visas. We arrange exchange programs like the Fulbright Exchange. We still invite trade delegations to try to enhance the trade and commercial relationship between the United States and Taiwan. Additionally, the United States recognizes directly in the Taiwan Relations Act that Taiwan's security, that the United States is very deeply invested in Taiwan's security and in the stability of the Taiwan Strait. And so one of the commitments that the United States makes in the Taiwan Relations Act is that we will help Taiwan meet its self-defense needs, because we believe that Taiwan's ability to meet its self-defense needs serves Taiwan's interests, but also serves U.S. and regional interests. And as we look now more broadly, and we talk a lot about the Indo-Pacific region, the Indo-Pacific strategy that the administration rolled out maybe 2 years ago. We recognize that Taiwan's ability to sustain its self-defense and the peace and stability of the Taiwan Strait is crucial also to the broader Indo-Pacific regional stability.
Now, reading the Taiwan Relations Act, you can see that there's room for interpretation in the language of the act. In particular, in terms of the kinds of defensive weapons that Taiwan can purchase from the United States. Of course, the United States can determine what kinds of weapons Taiwan would need. Taiwan makes a request, the United States evaluates the request, and then follows through with it. I'm curious, how much has the United States interpretation of the Taiwan Relations Act shifted over the last 40 years from administration to administration?
Yeah, so I mean, I would first just address one part of your question, which is that the process by which Taiwan requests an arms purchase and the United States evaluates it isn't quite so linear. The United States and Taiwan are in regular touch about Taiwan's defense needs. It's more of a consultative process where we discuss and decide together what Taiwan needs and what the United States is in a position to provide.
So at the point at which Taiwan makes the request, Taiwan and the United States have actually already been discussing that sort of a package that they've asked for.
Yeah, generally speaking, it's an ongoing consultative process by which we're always talking about, what the future needs will be and how Taiwan can best meet its needs today, but also needs of the future. But to answer your question about interpretations of the Taiwan Relations Act, the law itself is fairly simple. I think generally different administrations bring with them different priorities. They're looking at enhancing different parts of the US-Taiwan relationship, so they perhaps focus on different parts of the law. But to me, interestingly, our policy towards Taiwan really hasn't changed in 40 years. I sometimes feel like a broken record. A lot of my job is saying our policy has not changed.
Reiterating things seems to be a very important part of it.
Literally saying that our policy has not changed. That's a really important part of my job, reiterating that our policy has not changed. But what actually has changed in the last 40 years is Taiwan.
Yeah.
I mean, Taiwan, when the Taiwan Relations Act was passed, I think a lot of even the people who voted for it were really skeptical of what it could accomplish.
In the U.S. Congress.
Yes, in the U.S. Congress, that's right. At the time, Taiwan was not a democracy. It was not the economic powerhouse that it's become, the high-tech center. People didn't really know what could be accomplished through purely unofficial ties. There was no arrangement like this elsewhere in the world. And so when you ask a lot of the people who actually voted on the Taiwan Relations Act, how they feel in retrospect, they say it sort of exceeded their wildest expectations.
Wow.
In part because the US-Taiwan relationship has grown so much, but in part because Taiwan itself has really developed into a vibrant democracy, into a bustling market economy, like I said, into a high-tech powerhouse. And so I think the reason that the US-Taiwan relationship looks so different than it did 40 years ago has a lot to do with the fact that Taiwan looks so different.
Yes. Well, actually, looking at the Taiwan Relations Act, it says 18 million people of Taiwan. Now it's 23 million people, and the demographics have totally changed.
That's exactly right.
Now, as far as you know, does the United States have any similar relationship or a similar act governing relations with any other place in the world?
I'm not aware of anything like it. I mean, people, I think, like I said at the time, people were really skeptical of what the Taiwan Relations Act could really achieve, what are unofficial ties. But it's sort of a singular legislative accomplishment. And, we all know that Congress, the US Congress, I think in Taiwan this is also true, that legislatures in general sometimes have trouble finding points of consensus.
Yes.
And in the United States for a long time, and certainly today, support for US-Taiwan partnership is truly a bipartisan issue, an issue of bipartisan consensus. And if you look at the last few pieces of legislation that have moved through U.S. Congress and Taiwan, and a lot of them are largely symbolic, just for example, the Taiwan Travel Act, recognizing the importance of high-level visitors back and forth between the U.S. and Taiwan. These
like high-level government visitors, yeah.
Exactly. These pieces of legislation tend to pass almost unanimously, if not unanimously, which is pretty unusual in U.S. Congress. I mean, I don't know if you've been following the news, but it could be a very partisan environment. But one thing that that members of Congress, of U.S. Congress, seem to agree on is the value of the U.S.-Taiwan relationship. And that's one of the reasons we're so happy to have a delegation of members of U.S. Congress coming out to mark the anniversary of this very important and this important legislative achievement from 40 years ago. We even had a former member of Congress who was visiting under other circumstances, who was one of the people who voted on the Taiwan Relations Act.
Wow.
Yeah, she was really involved in the formulation of the act, and she said even she really wasn't sure, but is so incredibly proud.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, I know that security is a huge part of the reason why Taiwan Relations Act is so important, not just because of weapons sales. I want to read to you another part of it here. It says, "It is the policy of the United States to maintain the capacity of the United States to resist any resort to force or other forms of coercion that would jeopardize the security or the social or economic system of the people in Taiwan." Can you tell me, what does that involve? What does that look like?
Yeah, so what that means is that the United States believes that any settlement, any solution between Taiwan between Taipei and Beijing needs to be one that comes as a result of peaceful negotiations. So when we signed the Taiwan Relations Act, and if you look at the 3 joint communiques between the United States and Beijing, they all rest on the assumption that the solution to this situation will be one that comes as a result of peaceful negotiations. And any efforts to use violence or even use coercion that threatens violence is contrary to that type of outcome. And specifically, we believe is really detrimental to the stability of the Taiwan Strait and to the people on both sides of the strait. So to us, as I mentioned, we feel deeply invested in the security and the stability of the strait. We believe that the status quo, as imperfect as it may be, has actually ensured decades of peace and stability across the strait. And so we feel very protective of that status quo. So when we see efforts to alter the status quo, we view that as a threat to the peace and stability that we think people on both sides of the strait have really benefited from for a long time.
So, for example, recently we saw 2 Chinese jet fighters which crossed over the median line in the Taiwan Strait. Would that be considered a provocative act or a change to the status quo that the United States would be interested in maybe voicing an opinion on?
Yes. In fact, we did voice an opinion on that.
Multiple times, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. That was definitely a collection of behaviors that we viewed as being coercive, as being provocative, and threatening to the status quo. And so we, frequently call on everybody involved to abstain from these types of behaviors. And generally speaking, Taiwan has been a really strong partner in helping to maintain the peace and stability of the Taiwan Strait.
And could the United States do something more than speaking out against this sort of act?
I think it depends on the situation. So, for example, when various countries in Latin America were pressured to sever ties with Taiwan, the United States took some more assertive, or offered a more assertive response. We withdrew our ambassadors from those countries. We look for ways to send as strong a message as possible that we think that this kind of behavior really undermines regional stability and is really unproductive to what we think is in everyone's best interest, which is, of course, peace and stability. But the Taiwan Relations Act and the 3 joint communiques also say that the solution to cross-strait problems needs to come as a result of peaceful negotiations between Taipei and Beijing, so between the 2 parties.
Let's talk a little bit about the U.S. military that are stationed at the American Institute in Taiwan. Now, recently this has become a news item again about the fact that the AIT has Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines that are in the AIT office and will be in the new compound as well. What's your take on this story?
So, this was something that we said recently. We are frequently asked about our security posture. People are really curious about US-Taiwan security cooperation. I think it's just a kind of topic of intense speculation and curiosity. And so we really just wanted to let people know that actually since 2005, among the personnel at AIT have been active duty military who have included members of the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines. And this is part of our operation.
And this is something that people knew about in 2005.
Yeah, we put out a notice then. I mean, if you Google it, you can see there's news reporting all the way back to 2005. So this wasn't really meant to be a news bombshell.
So why do you think it's become a thing again?
I don't know. I think the pace of news can move very, very quickly here. I know the news media environment is intensely competitive. So I think sometimes people print before they really do all of the requisite research. So there was nothing really new about this this statement. We were really just providing context to people.
But at the same time, then Beijing has responded to that again. So that means that you need to then respond to Beijing.
We don't need to respond every time they respond. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, this is the life of a spokesperson, right?
Right,
I mean, this is kind of, yeah.
But not every inquiry deserves a response, and not every angry message deserves a response. So in this case, we were stating something that's been true for a long time. It's never been a secret. It's something we were really upfront about when it started, and
I'm curious to know a little bit about your role as a spokesperson and how much you have to deal with fake news. I mean, everybody's been talking about fake news. It's become a catchphrase, but it's also something that you have to deal with. Can you talk maybe a little bit about some of the things that have happened, or maybe some specific elements of fake news that you've had to respond to?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I mean, I frequently feel the need to kind of draw the line between misinformation and disinformation. And I would say I'm more often subject to misinformation than disinformation, meaning that it wasn't deliberate or malicious. I think sometimes it's just a little bit sloppy. So, I occasionally find that I need to follow up with reporters that I've spoken to and kind of correct the record. Or more often, it's reporters who report but don't call us for comment, and we want to let them know that something is actually not true, or that it's sort of a report of a report of a report, and it becomes this game of telephone. But I do think that misinformation and disinformation are very closely intertwined, because in order for people to be able to identify disinformation, which is in fact a problem. I mean, it's a problem in the United States, it's a problem in Taiwan, it's basically a problem anywhere that there is social media, I would say.
Absolutely.
In order for people to be able to really identify disinformation, they need to have reliable news sources that they can compare things they read to as a standard. And so, we hope that news outlets will see this as sort of a call to action to be that standard, so that when people see something and think that may not be right, they can then go to their trustworthy news source and say, did they report on this? How did they report on this? And that's a really useful way to figure out whether something is just meant to rile you up, or whether something is in fact a piece of news. So we've actually, in addition to just being sort of occasional victim of misinformation. And I just want to say I have actually had, by and large, very good experiences with the press in Taiwan. Taiwan has a free and vigorous press. I'm really excited to be working here. We generally get what we think is very fair coverage, and we're so happy that people are so interested in our activities. But as an occasional victim of misinformation, I would say that we also are really interested at AIT in working with Taiwan to address disinformation more generally, because as I said, this is sort of a shared challenge that a lot of democracies face.
And how are you working with Taiwan to do that?
Yeah, so we've held a couple of workshops to help build media literacy, which is kind of a modern term of art, I think, to describe people's ability to distinguish disinformation from actual news. And it's just a series of ongoing consultations between the US and Taiwan. We actually think Taiwan has a lot of great expertise in this area. There's a lot of work in the AI field. There's a lot of great fact-checking work that's going on here. And so we hope to continue to talk together about how to face this challenge, which, like I said, I think is really a challenge faced by a lot of democracies. I think outsiders try to exploit the freedom of speech and freedom of press and internet freedom that we have to undermine public trust. And I think Taiwan has some great strategies. We have some strategies, and we're hoping to continue to work together and also work with other countries in the region who might also be facing this challenge.
It seems to be a global problem.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, social media.
Like I said, if you have the internet, you're probably a victim of fake news. Yeah.
Yes, I am, in fact.
Yeah.
Now, it's not likely that the United States is going to change its laws regarding Taiwan, but NYU law professor Jerome Cohen has said that perhaps the U.S. can change its way of dealing with Taiwan. One of his interesting suggestions was that Taiwan's representative office in the U.S., TICRO, which is the Taipei Economic and Cultural Representative Office, could consider changing its name to the Taiwan Institute in America. So that would be similar to the American Institute in Taiwan.
Right.
Is that something that could happen, or that the United States would give the nod to?
I don't really know specific. I mean, I'm not sure if we've been approached about this question of Taiwan, of TechRo changing its name. We certainly have a really good relationship with TechRo. They're sort of, as you mentioned, our counterpart in the United States. You know, the United States is definitely not planning to change our policy. As I mentioned earlier, our policy has not changed. This is something I say a lot. Yeah, a name change is something I think that's probably a decision that would happen way above my pay grade, is what I should say.
It's a very clever response for a spokesperson. Do you have to use that often?
Once in a while.
Once in a while. So actually, I want to finish by asking you a little bit about your job, what it's like to be a spokesperson for AIT. You've been here for now about 2 years?
Yeah.
And you've been in your capacity as spokesperson for AIT for a year?
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what's been the most surprising part of your job?
Oh, how often my phone rings. Yeah, I sometimes can't believe it. Like I said, you know, Taiwan has a really free and vigorous press. And so actually, when I first arrived, I invited a lot of reporters to a reception. I wanted to introduce myself and get to know them. And I told them, if you're doing a story about the United States, or about AIT, or about me, or about any kind of US policy, please call me. Please, even if it's in the middle of the night, I would much rather you call me than you just report and ask questions later, because my least favorite thing is when reporters print a story, send it to me, and then ask me for comment about a story that they've already printed.
Right.
And I think they really took me at my word, which is actually really good. But I told them, when my phone rings in the middle of the night, to me, that's a sign that I'm in like a really vibrant democracy. That's how I know press freedom is alive and well when my phone is ringing and my husband's like, shh. You know? So yeah, it's, I guess, you know, being in Taiwan, it's been really interesting to see just the degree of interest people have in AIT's activities and in US policy more generally. But it's really encouraging, because I think people generally are really supportive and really do see the value in the US-Taiwan partnership. But also the journalists are so nice. I mean, people kind of warned me it could be a little wild here, essentially. But I have had a really wonderful experience so far. People have been very kind. I've been impressed by how smart and diligent people are. Yeah, so it's been really good.
And what's the toughest part of your job?
Oh, I hate not commenting. I talk a lot. I don't know if you can tell. So when we really
You've done very well today, I have to say.
No, so you know, a lot of times we really need to coordinate with our colleagues in Washington before we answer a question. And it's so frustrating. I understand what the news cycle here is like, and there are situations that are serious and important, and we definitely want to say something about them, but the idea that I have to kind of hold people off sometimes overnight so we can catch up with our colleagues in Washington and coordinate is really frustrating to me, because yeah, I want to keep up with the news cycle, but at the same time, we want to have a measured response. I also think that I think not every question deserves an answer. And in my mind and in my personal life, I can be a little bit argumentative. But in my professional life, I have to really not take the bait a lot of the time. Yeah. So when people ask deliberately provocative questions, a lot of times, you know, I have nothing to say about them. Or when they ask questions about things that are really not newsworthy, I know that by providing any response at all, I'm basically giving them the fodder they need to write an article. Right. Whereas if I don't respond, there's really nothing to report. So self-control, I guess, is the hardest part of my job.
I can understand that. I can understand that. So it's saying no comment and not giving a reason why you're not giving the comment too.
Yeah, not giving a comment or having to wait to give a comment, I think can be difficult, because I hate the idea that certain things go unresponded to, even for a period of time. I just think it's so important for the US to be out there. And I think the way the information environment functions, there's a vacuum, and if we don't fill it, someone else will. So I believe in our narrative. I believe we have good things to say, and when we don't say them, other people fill that space. So I think for the most part, though, we're able to provide a lot of content to the media here. I'm quoted pretty frequently in the newspaper.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Well, it's been a pleasure talking with you.
Thank you.
And best wishes
Likewise.
While you're commemorating the 40th anniversary of the TRA and of AIT.
Thank you.
Thank you
we
again
really
for being
hope
with
that
us.
you'll come see us at our new facility.
Absolutely. I'm going to
Yeah.
take you up on that.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.